I was folding his shirts when I saw it. A gold earring, tiny, not mine, tucked inside his drawer next to his cufflinks. At first, I thought it was our granddaughter's. But when I picked it up, I recognized it. It was hers. Clara's. The woman I raised like my own daughter. My daughter-in-law. The ache in my chest was instant. But it wasn't just the betrayal that broke me. It was the realization that the home I'd built, the one I was standing in, no longer belonged to me. I had signed it over. To them. I never had a daughter of my own. Just my boy, Daniel. He was my miracle baby after 3 miscarriages and a difficult pregnancy that almost took me with it. His first breath gave my life new purpose. And from that moment, everything I did was for him. When Daniel met Clara in college, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. She was quiet, always polite. From the moment she first stepped into my kitchen and offered to wash dishes without me asking, I thought, she's a keeper. When they married, I crocheted her a shawl with my mother's pattern. Gave her my pearl earrings for the wedding. At the reception, I remember her hugging me and whispering, "You feel more like a mother than my own ever did." That stayed with me. After the wedding, they moved in with me for a while, just until they got on their feet. I didn't mind. The house felt alive again. Clara would bake with me. We'd share stories over wine while Daniel worked late shifts. I began calling her my girl. And when they finally moved into their own apartment, I cried. Not because I was lonely, but because I was proud. In those early years, I supported them in every way I could. Financially. Emotionally. I gave them $20,000 for the down payment on their first home. Helped renovate their kitchen when they had their first child. Took care of the baby when Clara had to work nights. I did all of it willingly. But somewhere along the way, things began to shift. It started subtly. They'd go on vacations without inviting me. Or tell me about family dinners after they happened. Clara stopped calling me Mom. She called me Eleanor. When I asked Daniel about it, he brushed it off. "You're overthinking things, Ma. Clara's just tired all the time." Tired. Maybe I was overthinking it. I am a sensitive person. But then came my 68th birthday. I baked a lemon cake, my favorite, and waited at the table all afternoon, wearing the blue dress Daniel once said made me look young again. They never came. No call. No message. That night, I stared at the candles flickering on that untouched cake and whispered to myself, maybe they forgot. But the next morning, I saw pictures. Photos of Clara, Daniel, and the kids at a vineyard, smiling wide under golden sun. I remember clutching my phone and whispering, "Why?" When I finally asked Daniel, he apologized. Half-heartedly. "Clara planned it," he said. "It slipped her mind." Slipped. Her mind. It hurt. But I forgave. That's what mothers do. Months passed. Then came the time Daniel lost his job. They were struggling to keep up with mortgage payments. I didn't hesitate. I offered for them to move back in. Clara seemed reluctant. But Daniel said, "Please, Mom. Just until we figure things out." I cleared out the master bedroom for them and moved into the smaller guest room myself. Gave them space. That was my first real mistake. It started with little things. Clara redecorated without asking. Removed my wedding photo from the living room wall and replaced it with some modern canvas. Then she started locking the bathroom from the inside when she wasn't using it. Said it was for privacy. Next came the suggestion, "Eleanor, maybe it's time you updated your will. Just in case. It'll make everything easier for the family." I laughed it off at first. But the way she said it chilled me. And then, one evening, Daniel came to me with a request. "Ma, Clara and I were thinking, why don't we just put the house in our name? It'll make things smoother. You'll always live here. Nothing will change." I hesitated. But he added, "You trust us, right?" I did. So I signed. I signed my house away. The house I worked for. Paid for. Maintained with my hands, my sweat, and my late husband's pension. Still, I didn't think they'd hurt me. Not really. Until that night. That earring. Gold. Teardrop-shaped. Clara's. I knew it the moment I picked it up. I had given it to her for her 3rd anniversary with Daniel. And it wasn't on her dresser. It was in his. I stood there in my old robe, heart pounding like a war drum, clutching that earring like it might explain itself. My mind fought logic. Maybe it fell. Maybe he borrowed it. Maybe, but deep down I knew. I began noticing other signs. Clara touching his arm too much when they sat together. Their long whispered conversations behind closed doors. How they both fell silent whenever I walked in. Then came the worst part. One morning, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But I froze when I heard Clara say, "She's old. She won't fight us. Just let her believe what she wants. Once she's gone, the house is legally ours anyway. Gone. Just let her believe what she wants." I felt my knees weaken. I pressed my hand to the wall for support. My own son. And the woman I treated like a daughter. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked back to my room, shut the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. And in that moment, something shifted in me. I thought of my mother. A woman who raised 6 children alone and never let anyone walk over her. She used to say, "Don't wait for people to hand you kindness. Take your dignity with both hands and walk." So I did. The next morning, I called my old friend Ruth. She was the one who helped me find a lawyer. She connected me to a quiet but sharp man named Mr. Harlan, who specialized in elder asset abuse. He listened, took notes, asked questions. I showed him the property transfer, the voice recordings I had quietly taken after that night. He said, "Eleanor, you have a case. And you're not alone." It wasn't just betrayal. It was manipulation. Abuse. That day, I started taking back my life, one signature at a time. And though I hadn't said a word to them yet, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Power. After I walked out of Mr. Harlan's office that rainy Tuesday afternoon, something inside me felt steadier. Stronger. The clouds hung low over the city, and the air smelled like old leaves and wet asphalt. But I stood tall, shoulders back, umbrella in hand. I wasn't just an old woman anymore. I was a woman with a plan. When I got home, Clara was in my kitchen, barefoot, sipping coffee, scrolling on her phone like she owned the place. And in a way, legally, she did. But I didn't let that show. "Afternoon, Eleanor," she said, her tone clipped, eyes not even meeting mine. "Afternoon," I replied, calm as still water. Daniel was out with the kids. I knew because I'd started quietly tracking their routines. When they came. When they left. I wasn't snooping. I was studying. Preparing. I moved through my days like normal. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. I began documenting. Every conversation. Every cold remark. Every exclusion. Clara saying, "This isn't your room anymore, Eleanor. You gave it up." Daniel mumbling, "It's just easier if you don't come to parent-teacher night. You know how Clara gets." My lawyer told me, "Keep everything. Words are just as powerful as documents in these cases. Especially when they reveal intent." So I did. Every night, I sat in the dark with a small recorder tucked under my blanket. I'd whisper what I remembered from the day. Word for word. Date and time. "You have a right to feel safe in your own home," Mr. Harlan had said. But the truth was, I didn't. Clara had started locking the master bedroom at night. I never asked why. I just noticed. Sometimes, I heard giggles behind that door. Other times, muffled whispers that twisted my stomach. One night, I stood outside their door, holding a tray with mint tea I had pretended to offer. I knew they wouldn't open. I didn't want them to. I just wanted to listen. I caught bits of it. Clara's voice. "She'll be gone soon anyway. She's old. Can barely get up the stairs. If we play nice, we'll get the rest in her will too." Daniel replied, laughing, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to this family." I stood there until my fingers went numb from gripping the tray. Then I turned, went back to my tiny guest room, and wrote it all down. I knew I couldn't fight them alone. So I called my granddaughter, my real granddaughter, Maria. She was 22. Bright. Kind. Living in a small apartment 2 hours away. We hadn't spoken much in the past year. Clara had always said she was too busy to visit. But when I called, she answered on the second ring. "Grandma," she said. "Everything okay?" I swallowed. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled. "Can you come see me this weekend? There's something I need to tell you. In person." She didn't ask questions. Just said, "I'll be there." That Saturday, Maria arrived with her curls pulled into a high bun and a big tote bag slung over her shoulder. She looked so much like her mother, God rest her soul, Daniel's first wife. We sat in the garden, the one I used to tend daily before Clara turned it into a lifeless patch of gravel and lavender. I poured us lemonade. She took my hands. "What's going on?" And I told her. Everything. The earring. The whispers. The signature. The lawyer. I watched her face change with each word. "I don't even know who my father is anymore," she whispered, eyes glistening. "And Clara. She used to braid my hair." I reached into the old biscuit tin and handed her copies of the documents Mr. Harlan helped me print. The house deed transfer notes from the conversations, Clara's forged signature on a check from my account. "Yes, I found that too. She's been withdrawing money," I said. "Small amounts. But regular. Using my old checkbook." Maria stood up. "We're going to fight this, Grandma. I promise you. You're not alone." For the first time in months I believed that. The next phase of Mr. Harlan's plan involved hiring a private investigator. Discreet. Sharp. A man named Simon, mid-40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone. He followed Daniel and Clara for 2 weeks. What he found gutted me. Receipts from a hotel downtown. Not in both their names. Clara had been meeting another man. A younger one. About 35. Someone she called Aaron. Simon even got photos. When he handed me the envelope, I just stared at it. I didn't open it. Not yet. But later that night, I sat in my room and carefully peeled back the flap. There she was. My daughter-in-law. Holding hands. Laughing. Leaning into a man I didn't recognize. A man who wasn't Daniel. Suddenly everything made sense. The overcompensation. The coldness. Her controlling behavior. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a con. She had manipulated me, my son, and this household to suit her games, and now she was playing both sides. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. But it wasn't from pain. It was clarity. When I showed Daniel the photos, he stared at them without blinking. Then he turned pale. "Where did you get these?" "I had help," I said. "Because I knew something was wrong. And you refused to see it." She said it was over," he whispered. "That they used to date, but I cut him off." She lied. "And you let her. You let her turn me into a ghost in my own home. But no more." I handed him a copy of the document from my lawyer. A reversal claim. Evidence-backed. The start of a case to void the house transfer based on manipulation, coercion, and elder abuse. Daniel read it with trembling hands. "You'd really do this, Ma?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "I already have." The next morning, Clara confronted me. Stormed into the kitchen, red-faced. "You went through my things?" she spat. "You hired someone to follow me?" "I protected myself," I said calmly. "And I have every legal right to." She lunged forward like she wanted to say more. But Maria stepped in. "Don't raise your voice at my grandmother," she said, voice low and steady. "This is her house. And you're done here." Clara stared between us, stunned. The power had shifted. And she knew it. Within a week, Clara packed up and left. Daniel stayed. For a while. But our relationship was never the same. He said he needed time. I said I'd already given him too much. And one morning, he was gone too. The house was mine again. Legally, emotionally, spiritually. I repainted the walls. Put my wedding photo back in the living room. And in the garden, I planted roses. My mother's favorite. I was no longer afraid. Not of being alone. Not of starting over. Because I had done something many people my age are too scared to do. I stood up. I fought back. And I won. There's a strange kind of silence that settles over a house once chaos leaves it behind. Not empty. Just still. The morning after Daniel moved out, I walked into the kitchen and stood by the window with a warm cup of tea. The light poured in soft through the linen curtains. For the first time in years, there was no arguing, no slammed doors, no passive-aggressive sighs. Just birdsong. It was peace. And yet, my heart didn't quite know what to do with it. I still woke early, as I always had. Made 2 cups of tea by instinct. One for me, one for no one. I still paused before walking into the living room, half expecting to see Clara sprawled across my couch, phone in hand, voice dripping with complaint. But it was just me now. And I was free. I didn't cry when they left. But I grieved. I grieved the daughter I thought Clara had been. The sweet young girl who once stood beside me in the kitchen, asking how I folded dumplings so neatly. I grieved the son I raised with bedtime stories and homemade soup, the boy who once clung to my dress when he scraped his knees. Grief is funny that way. You don't always cry. Sometimes you just sit quietly with it. Let it pass through you like a cold breeze on a warm day. But grief is also a gateway. Because after grief comes space. And space can be filled. I started small. One morning, I opened the garage and pulled out the old gardening tools Clara had shoved into storage. They were still dusty, but intact. The soil out back had gone dry, the flower beds barren. Clara always said gardens were too much work for no reward. But I saw things differently. I dug into the dirt with gloved hands, feeling the earth crumble beneath my fingers. Planted rose bushes. Yellow ones. For joy. For rebirth. The next week, I added a white hydrangea bush and 2 lavender plants. It became my morning ritual. Water. Tend. Breathe. With each passing day, the garden bloomed. And so did I. Maria started coming by every Saturday. We'd cook together, like I used to with her mother. We made homemade pasta from scratch one week. Peach cobbler the next. Sometimes we talked about Daniel. Sometimes we didn't. But she never pressured me to feel anything I wasn't ready to. One evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky in golden lilac. She turned to me and said, "You know, you're not just surviving this. You're growing through it." I smiled, blinking away the sting behind my eyes. Maybe. Some days I feel strong. Other days I feel like I'm pretending. That's still strength, she said. Even pretending. Because it means you haven't given up. She was right. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I found an old sewing box tucked behind the dusty Christmas decorations. It belonged to my mother. Inside were pieces of unfinished embroidery. Delicate roses, vines, birds. She had such patience in her hands. I remembered sitting at her feet as a little girl, watching her thread needle through cloth. She used to say, "Create something every day, Eleanor, even if no one sees it." I set up a sewing table by the window. And I began to stitch again. At first, I was clumsy. My hands stiff from years of disuse. But slowly, the rhythm came back. Needle in. Pull. Loop. Knot. Within weeks, I had made hand towels with daisies, small pillowcases with monograms, even a table runner for Sunday tea. Maria posted a photo of it online and said, "My grandma is making magic with fabric." To my surprise, someone messaged her asking to buy one. Then another. And another. By the end of the month, I had a little notebook with orders. 2 embroidered aprons, 4 tea towels, a monogrammed baby blanket. Maria set up a little online shop for me. "We'll call it Stitched by Eleanor," she said proudly. I laughed. "You really think people will pay for my old hands' work?" "They're not just paying for cloth, Grandma. They're paying for heart. For a piece of you." Around that same time, I received a letter from my lawyer. It was short and official. The deed reversal had gone through. The house was legally mine again. Fully. And Clara? Well, according to Simon the investigator, she had moved to a nearby city with Aaron. She was working as a real estate assistant. Daniel, from what Maria told me, was living in a rented apartment and had begun therapy. He sent me a letter once. Just a few lines. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I remember everything you did for me. I hope one day you find it in your heart to speak to me again. I haven't replied yet. Not because I'm angry, but because I'm still healing. Forgiveness is not a favor. It's a process. And I owe myself that time. One day, as I stood in the garden trimming the rose bushes, my neighbor Martha came over with a pie. I just wanted to say, she began awkwardly, I noticed how different things seem at your place these days. Quiet. Peaceful. You look happy. I smiled. I think I am. She nodded, then asked, would you be willing to come speak at our women's circle next month? A few of us are dealing with, well, difficult family things. And I think your story might help. At first I hesitated. But something in me said yes. I told her I'd come. That night, I stood in front of my mirror and looked at myself. Not the version Clara had tried to reduce to an old woman in the corner, but the version I had reclaimed. Eleanor. Wife. Mother. Survivor. Creator. Empowered. I smoothed my silver hair back and whispered to my reflection, you're still here. You still matter. And you are far from done. When I stepped into the small church basement for the women's circle, I wasn't sure what to expect. Folding chairs, soft murmurs, the smell of coffee and old linoleum. They welcomed me gently. No fanfare. Just a warm smile from Martha and a quiet, take your time, Eleanor. I stood, cleared my throat and began. I told them about the house. The years I poured into my family. The feeling of being erased, slowly, politely, until I barely existed in my own home. Then I told them about Clara. About the betrayal. About Daniel. I expected silence. Maybe pity. But instead, I saw women nodding. Some with tears in their eyes. I thought I was the only one whispered. Another reached for my hand and said, you just told my story. That night, I realized my pain had become more than a wound. It had become a mirror. And for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt useful. A week later, a woman from the group, Alicia, called me. She was starting a local podcast, small and homegrown. Would you share your story? She asked. Your voice. It gave me courage to leave my toxic daughter-in-law's house. Others need to hear it. I agreed. We sat in her living room with a simple mic and a cup of cinnamon tea. I spoke plainly from the heart. No drama. Just truth. The episode aired. And somehow it caught fire. Maria called me 2 days later. Grandma. Thousands of people have listened. They're writing comments. Messages. Sharing their own stories. I didn't know what to say. I was just me. But maybe that was enough. Soon, I was invited to speak at a senior center, then a local women's group. And every time I spoke, I felt myself standing taller. I was no longer invisible. Then one day, Daniel showed up. He didn't call. Just stood at my front gate, holding a brown envelope. I almost didn't open the door. But curiosity, and something softer, won. He looked thinner. Older. Not just in the face but in the eyes. Can I come in? He asked quietly. We sat in the garden, surrounded by blooming roses. The same roses I once planted to survive the silence. He handed me the envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. Apologizing. Not excusing. No buts. Just sorrow. I let you down. I let her convince me that you were the problem. I was weak. I see that now. I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to be better. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I wanted you to have this. I looked down. Inside the envelope was a check. A large one. It's the money you gave us for the house. And more. I sold my shares in the company. I can't undo what we did. But I want to give back what's yours. I didn't speak for a long time. Then I whispered, I may forgive you one day, Daniel. But I can't forget. Not yet. He nodded. I understand. Before he left, I placed my hand on his. Thank you for coming. That took courage. Life didn't go back to how it was. But in many ways it became something better. I kept sewing. Kept speaking. Kept growing. Maria helped me organize a small local retreat for women over 60. Women who had felt discarded, manipulated, or abandoned by their families. We called it the Second Bloom. On the last day of the retreat, a woman stood and said, Eleanor, you made me believe in myself again. I walked in here ashamed. Now I walk out with my head high. I cried. We all did. Because this was the life I was meant to live in my later years. Not one of quiet suffering, but of strength. Of truth. Of helping others bloom when they thought their season had ended. I may have lost a son, a home, a version of love that wasn't real. But I found something deeper. My voice. My purpose. Myself. I used to believe legacy meant what you handed down in a will. A house, a piece of jewelry, a bank account with a dwindling balance. But now, sitting in the garden that bloomed from betrayal, I understand it differently. Legacy is the story you leave behind when people speak your name. And after everything I've endured, I've decided mine will be one of strength. It had been over a year since Clara walked out of my home in a storm of slammed drawers and cold glares. Daniel had visited only twice in that time, once to return the money I had once given so freely, and once to bring his children for a Sunday lunch, where we all tiptoed through a shallow version of peace. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And yet, life had found a rhythm again. A soft, graceful tempo. I woke up without dreading the day. I cooked for one but ate with pleasure. I stopped waiting for phone calls that never came. Instead, I answered the ones that did. From strangers turned sisters, women who had heard my story on a podcast, in a support circle, or through a single-stitched apron that made them feel seen. They wrote to me. Poured their hearts out in emails and handwritten letters with phrases like, "You said what I never could." My own daughter-in-law did the same. I thought I was crazy. You made me feel sane again. These women didn't want sympathy. They wanted to feel like they weren't the only ones. That they weren't forgotten. And I understood that ache intimately. That spring, Maria and I hosted a small event in town. A gathering of women over 60, each of them bringing one item they had once been proud of and now felt disconnected from. A wedding ring. A recipe book. A photo of a younger self. We sat in a circle and told the stories behind them. One woman, Lorraine, held up a wedding band she hadn't worn since her husband left for a younger woman. I used to think this meant forever, she said. But now I think it means I survived it. Another, Miss Yvette, clutched an old radio microphone. I was a jazz singer. Had a regular spot every Sunday night. Then one day, the man I loved told me I should stop because no one listens to old women. Her voice shook. So I stopped. And that was the biggest regret of my life. We sat with her words in silence. Then I asked, Yvette, would you sing for us now? Her lips parted, almost in protest. But slowly her voice, soft, weathered, beautiful, rose from her chest like it had just been waiting for permission. It was the most soulful thing I'd ever heard. We all cried. That day, we didn't just remember who we were. We reclaimed it. But even with healing, the past doesn't always stay quiet. It came knocking again one morning in the form of a letter. Not from Clara or Daniel, but from Clara's attorney. I sat at my table, the envelope heavy in my hands. Inside, a claim. Clara was seeking reimbursement for emotional damages from the public backlash she'd received after my story gained attention. Her lawyer cited defamation. I read the letter 3 times. Each time slower. The audacity nearly made me laugh. But it also lit something ancient in me. She was trying again. This time, not through manipulation, but through intimidation. A last-ditch attempt to silence me. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I took the letter to Mr. Harlan. He smiled wryly and said, "We'll handle this, Eleanor. Let them try." But something in me wanted more than just legal defense. I wanted truth. So I wrote a letter back. Not through my lawyer. Through me. "Dear Clara, you came into my life like a daughter, and I loved you like one. I gave freely, not because I was foolish, but because I believed in family. I won't apologize for surviving what you did to me. I won't apologize for speaking truth. If the truth damaged your image, it's because the truth wasn't flattering. That's not on me. I wish you healing. But I will not protect your lies anymore. I am no longer afraid of losing things, because I already lost everything I didn't need. May you one day understand the difference between silence and grace." Eleanor, I never heard back from her. The case didn't move forward. Probably because her lawyer realized exactly what I had. The truth is the strongest defense of all. And once you stop hiding from it, no one can hold it over you. Later that year, Maria and I took a trip together to New Mexico. It was my first time leaving the state in over a decade. We stayed at a quiet desert retreat. No phones, no clocks, just sunrises and sagebrush and healing air. One night, sitting beside a small fire, Maria turned to me and said, "You know, Grandma, I think you're not just telling your story anymore. You're giving other women the courage to tell theirs." I looked into the fire and thought about that. About how a lifetime of putting others first had almost left me last. About how pain had been my prison, but also my passport to something greater. "I don't want to leave this world bitter," I said. "But I do want to leave it honest." She nodded, brushing ash from her sweater. "That's exactly what you're doing." 2 weeks after our return from New Mexico, I was sitting on the porch when a little girl from down the street rode by on her pink bicycle. She stopped at the gate, looked at my garden, lush with roses and lavender, and asked, "Did you plant all those by yourself?" I smiled. "Every single one." She beamed, then asked something that stopped me. "Are you someone's grandma?" It should have been a simple yes. But I paused. Because the truth was, yes, I was. And no, I wasn't. At least not in the way I had once been. Clara had taken that from me. Daniel had let it happen. But I had built something stronger than titles or roles. "I'm everyone's grandma," I finally said, and the little girl giggled and sped off. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like something more than just what I had lost. I felt whole. Months passed. Maria's little online shop turned into something bigger. I couldn't sew fast enough to keep up with the orders. So I taught 3 local women, each over 60, each of them feeling forgotten or discarded like I once had. We called it the Threaded Sisterhood. We didn't just stitch fabric. We stitched stories into everything we made. Tiny initials, dates, symbols of survival. Each apron, towel, or blanket came with a tag that read, "Handmade by a woman who reclaimed her worth." And people loved it. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. One day, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference in Chicago. I almost said no. But Maria said, "Go. You have something to say that people need to hear." I stood on that big stage in a navy blue dress with my silver hair curled just enough to bounce at the ends. My knees trembled as I stepped up to the mic. Then I told them everything. About Clara. About the house. About the earring. About losing my identity in service of people who only loved the version of me that gave, and never asked for anything back. And then, about what came next. I ended with this. I thought I was too old to start again. Too tired to fight back. Too late to find myself. But here's what I know now. You are never too old to rewrite your story. Dignity doesn't have an age limit. And the second half of your life can be more powerful than the first. If you choose to stop shrinking. The room stood up. Not out of politeness but because they understood. Tears in their eyes. Applause in their hands. And I stood there, stronger than I ever was in my youth. Daniel wrote me another letter. This one was short. "I'm proud of you, Ma. Even if I was the villain in your story, thank you for still writing your ending with grace. I'm trying to be better. I hope one day I'm worthy of visiting your garden again. I didn't need to answer. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't always require words. Sometimes it just requires peace. Clara? I haven't seen her since. Last I heard, she left Aaron and moved again. Some people keep running from their own reflection. But I stopped running the day I looked in the mirror and said, "This is who I am now, and she's enough." Today, I walk through my home and see no ghosts. The hallway still smells like lemon polish. The shelves are full of books and fabric, not tension. My bedroom is warm, soft, and entirely mine. In the back garden, the wind rustles the yellow roses I planted the day after I took back my home. They bloom every year. Resilient. Like me. Like every woman who has been used, erased, or betrayed, and still chooses to rise. I don't know how many days I have left. But I know that whatever comes next, I will meet it as Eleanor. Unbroken. Unbent. Unashamed. Because I have lived. I have learned. And above all, I have reclaimed my life with my own hands.